I knew that I couldn't get to replace Thomas Watson Jr., the very, very typically found. And I wanted to run my own business. And so, with my wife's great support, boy, that's one of the luckiest things I ever did in my life. And I'm also now, I call myself Lucky Mel. I'm lucky because this woman chose to marry me. And what a wonderful choice that is.
So God blesses us in many ways, doesn't he? Hello and welcome to Along the Way Life's Journey. I'm your host, Carl Buccellato. As I've told you many, many times, the purpose of this show is to bring forth guests who have lived through certain experiences and life-changing events that are willing to share with others inspiration and motivational comments to help other people lift themselves up a little bit, make a better life for themselves. And then my guest today is just such a man. I've said many times, I meet wonderful people as I travel around this world. I told you a couple of months ago, I went in for breakfast, and there and behold, God allowed me to meet a man by the name of Felipe de Leon, who was 30 years a master sergeant with special forces in education and training. A marvelous man. Retired from the military, went on to serve 20 years in the Broward County school system, encouraging young people to go on and get educated and go to college. And almost every one of his students did that. Remarkable man. Then I met another man on a cruise recently, a couple of years ago. Turned out he was the first Top Gun ever. Tom Cruise, eat your heart out. This guy was the real thing, and he was on my show. Well, 2 weeks ago, I was at a menswear shop in Boca Raton, Florida, and I came across a nice couple, and we started to chat, and she said something to me that really struck me. She said, it's been 30 years since he wore a suit or a tie. I said, really? What a lucky guy. 30, all that amount of time. So I want you to welcome my guest today, Mel Nass. Mel and Phyllis have been married 62 years, and they have a remarkable story to tell. Mel and Phyllis are originally from New York. He was educated in the New York school system. He's a graduate of Manhattan High School of Aviation Training, City College, CW Post, and then he went on to take a job with the big, sterile IBM. Now, I know people who worked for IBM, they said it was very confining and difficult. But he was an engineer with IBM for 20 years. And then he made a startling life change. And I say to myself, what kind of a change would he make? I thought maybe Silicon Valley. He went to go into the techie things, do all these amazing things. But not Mel and Phyllis. They did something very different. They decided they were going to follow a dream. And I introduce you now to Mel Nass, my friend who's on the line here with us. Mel, welcome to the show.
And thank you for that great introduction, an accurate one. And so my story really begins in Brooklyn, in New York City, of course. And I learned 4 valuable lessons that has stayed with me through all my years. And those 4 lessons were, when I came out of my house, I'd either go left or I'd go right, and there'd be 30 boys and girls in each direction. And there was a candy store. And what I learned there was to communicate, to speak with all the others. And, out of that communication, kind of the way you either became a leader or a follower, right. Amongst the people. And so that's so important these days, communications. And I'm really in a little way upset about lots of times I go into a restaurant, I see families sitting there, the children, each with an iPhone, and playing with their iPhone rather than, if you will, speaking with their parents and communicating. Well, that's where we are in the future. So I'm hoping you're not going to lose your very valuable communication skills. Then the second thing that I learned was competition. We would go out to the street and play whatever the game was, stickball or football or softball, basketball, you name it. And we tried to excel. Nobody wanted to be average. So I really would hope that no matter what your activities are, to excel to the best you can be within that activity. The third valuable lesson that I learned was the value of money, because I came from at best a blue collar family. My dad may he rest in peace, was a taxi driver, but he always had to put a roof over our head, food on the table. He tried his best. He wasn't very educated, but we didn't have a lot of spending money. So when I couldn't really go to my dad and say, "Hey, I need money for a date. I need money for this or that." So I always, at an early age, went out and got a job. I don't want to make you cry to say that I had a little Red Ryder wagon, and I collected newspapers out of people's garbage pails and took them to a junkyard near me and got a couple of pennies. That was my start, if you will, in business. And then I went on to delivering orders by bicycle, grocery orders, and through a whole host of jobs. Well, when it came time for me to go to high school, my parents thought, aside from getting an academic diploma, I should also learn a trade. So I applied for it and was accepted at the Manhattan High School of Aviation Trades. And I was so thankful for that, because aside from taking my academic courses and regents and getting scholarship, I was able to take 3 contiguous periods of shop during the day where I learned things like operating lathes and drill presses, and I learned welding and electrical work, and I learned one interesting thing, how to read an isometric drawing, which is a top view, a side view, a bottom, a top side, bottom view in 3 dimensions. And that was to come to help me. Shortly, I'll tell you how that came to help. It's amazing the way one thing runs into the other. And so while I was, and then I began my engineering studies at CCNY, but I needed a job as well. So aside from going to college for the studies, and I moved that to the evening, I got a job as a draftsman at Peabody Engineering in New York City, and they had you read and draw isometric drawings, and that's what I'd learned in high school. And while I was there, a fellow next to me said, "Hey, Mel, there's this company down the avenue. They're IBM, and it's amazing what they're doing. You look in the window, and you'll see their tape drives and computers whirling and stuff." He says, "I'm going over there to try and get a job." He said, "Maybe you should do that as well." And so I did go over there, and it was amazing. It was the early days of computing. It was 1959, and I worked for IBM for 20 years. So the beginning of that came about because I walked into the office, and there was a secretary, and I communicated. Once again, that communication skills I learned very nicely. Said, "I'd like to speak with management. I'd like to work here. I think I can really contribute." And she said, "Okay, I'll get you the manager." So I met with a fellow named Bob Fredericks, and he was the manager. And he heard my story, my background and everything. And he said, "Mel, I'll give you a DPAT, a data processing aptitude test. Let's see how you do there." And so I took the test, but I had said to Bob even before that, I said, "Bob, I'll do anything here at work. You want me to sweep the floor? I'll do that. I just want to show you what I can do. I don't even have to discuss price. You'll determine what you want to pay me, after you see what I can do." And I want to suggest to everybody that could be an approach for you to get a foot in the door using that technique of, let me show you what I can do. And after you see what I can do, then you'll decide what you think I'm worth.
Well,
And so Bob was
that certainly would be a novel approach today, because they seem to buttonhole everything down to the inch and what the specifics are and so forth. It's a very free feeling to know that somebody's values their own worth and they're willing to take a shot, to trust their own capability and say, "You pay me what you think I'm worth, because I know I'm going to prove it."
right. And those, even today, of course, everybody wants a resume or what have you. But but you're going to get to eventually speak to a person, it's getting in
Right.
front of somebody, hopefully.
Right.
And then at that interview, you can possibly use this technique. And so at any rate, so I began at IBM and I wasn't sweeping the floor. They put me on peripheral equipment. I took the Hollerith cards and put them on a tape to go onto a large frame computer. There was at that point an IBM 704 computer. There was 705, 709, 7094, 90s, and so forth. But so I began at the bottom and showed what I could do. And I moved along very lively, very happy with my work. I became a supervisor of a shift. And then I was working with programmers who would bring down their programs to run on the computer. I got to know a few of them. They got to know me. And one of them had developed a guy named Stan Foley. He had developed a huge, like oil fields, pipelines, anybody that needed big piping, a piping flexibility program. And he needed somebody to kind of read isometric drawings and translate that into Hollerith cards and then put it on a computer, run it, then put a report together, then mailing it out. And he said, Mel, let me give you a chance. I begged him for the chance. He said, I'll give you a shot. And so I began working in that area, and I did an outstanding job. I learned a lot about business and how to run a business. Because essentially, I was running a little business.
Sure.
And I was very successful. I really enjoyed that. And so I worked my way through that. Then I became a systems engineer, and I worked in systems engineering. There was a Bankers Trust was the seventh largest commercial bank in America, and they were down on Wall Street. And so I joined the IBM team down there to go in and do help them develop their ATM, the ATM systems that everybody uses today. But so that brings me through a very exciting IBM 20-year career. And I think anybody else might have, not anybody, most people would have been happy to stay on and keep working through the great company that it was at that time.
Okay, now here comes, folks. Here comes that big shift I was talking about. Pay attention to this, because when I heard it, I was astounded. A kid from Brooklyn came to a different dream. Let me hear it.
And so it all begins in Romania. How about that?
Oh,
My
wow.
grandmother came across at the turn of the century, and she and my grandfather were sewers in the sweatshop area of New York, and they did a great job. And then they owned a little manufacturing company, grew to a bigger one, and then they were able to buy a resort in the Catskill Mountains with those funds. And now, as a child, I would go up there every summer, and I'd work with my grandmother in her garden. So I always loved gardening and growing things. But because there I was in the city in a three-piece suit, working for the great IBM company, advancing as quickly as anybody else, getting raises ahead of everybody else. But, I knew in IBM, I don't know why, I knew that I could get to replace Thomas Watson Jr. I didn't think I had a chance at the very, very typically time. And I wanted to run my own business. And so, with my wife's great support, boy, that's one of the luckiest things I ever did in my life. And I'm also now, I call myself Lucky Mel. I'm lucky because this woman chose to marry me. And what a wonderful choice that is.
So God
And
blesses
everybody
us in
out
many
there-
ways, doesn't he? God blesses us in
Yeah,
many
and
ways,
she's-
especially with the mate he gives us.
Absolutely. And so with Phyllis's support, she graduated Queens College. She was a math major, but she went into teaching way back then. There were very few female, we'll say, programmers or what have you. So she went into the teaching field. But soon we had three children, three wonderful children. And before you knew it, we moved out of our first apartment in Flushing, New York, and we moved to Long Island into our house brand new house we had built, a 4-story colonial. And just by the way, the transitions I made, after that, we moved into a 72 by 14 wide trailer on a farm. And then after that, we, in the off season for 15 years, after the harvests were done, we moved on to a boat. We lived aboard a boat, a 42 Grand Banks trawler, a great boat, and became sea captains. And then after that, we here are now retired at Century Village in Florida.
Okay, but let's come back.
Journey.
Let's come back a little bit. You bought a farm in the Finger Lakes region, right? Is that what you told me?
That's exactly correct. Now, the way that came about was, and so I always had that dream at night of growing something, being a farmer. So we set out, Phyllis and I. She was not really greatly enthused with being a teacher. She said, "Mel, I'll join you in your dream if you really want to work in toward that direction." And so what we did for about 2 years, we did a lot of research. I would go out to a farm on Long Island, potato farms, Wickham's fruit farm, and then we moved it to other areas, upstate New York. And I would say to the farmer, I'd be dressed in my dungarees, my plaid shirt, looking as best I could at the farmer. And I would say, "Hey, I and my wife would like to work for you for the weekend for free." And all the way I asked is if I do good work Saturday and Sunday, would you be kind enough to spend maybe an hour with me and tell me what opportunities there are in your area of agriculture? And that worked.
Great approach.
Nobody ever turned me down.
No, free labor. What?
So, absolutely. And so we put in our time. And the first decision we made regarding agriculture and farming is we were going to handle a plant rather than livestock or an animal or poultry. And now once we knew we were going to do a plant, we just confined our research on weekends to growing farms. And so we worked our way, and we wound up one day going to Ben Marl Winery in the Hudson Valley area, where I met Mark Miller. He was running that. It was a harvest time, a beautiful time of the year. The leaves were turning colors. The grapes were coming in, and the Nebraska grapes, the Concord, the Niagara, the Catawba, they're so sweet smelling. You can smell them a half a mile away. Right. And so we fell in love with grapes. And we came up a few times working with Eric. And then we said, well, okay, we like grapes. Let's go see where else we could buy a farm and investigate it further. So I went to upstate to Cornell University and the Geneva Experiment Station. I actually started by going upstate and continued first my going to vineyards. And now I would knock on a vineyardist door. And one of those vineyardists is the famous Dr. Constantine Frank on Seneca Lake and the Finger Lakes. And I sat with him in his brick house on his patio. And I told him about my desire to become a farmer. And he really encouraged that. And he said, Mel, all right, come back next weekend and I'll be happy to have you work with me. So I came back the next weekend, and his wife answered the door and says, I'm sorry that Dr. Frank is ill. He's sick. He can't meet with you. And she said, well, we schedule for another time. So what I did at that point was I went back into Hammondsport, the town, found a real estate dealer there because I thought I'd now find other farms. And I tell him my story, and he says, Mel, there was another guy that came out of Wall Street, Madison Avenue. He lives right up here. His name is Peter Johnston. And why don't you go visit with Peter? So I went up to Peter. I told him my story. We liked each other very, very much. He was very kind and said, all right, come on out here this weekend and you'll work with me right now. And now for the next couple of months, I came out. And Peter was an incredible guy, a real pioneer in the wine industry in New York that never has gotten the credit for that. One of the things, his work ethic was, Mel, I only work 364 days a year. I take off after Christmas. And believe me, when I went up to him, gosh, he's standing alongside his spray rig attached to a tractor with, he was spraying vinifera grapes with sulfur, and he had more yellow sulfur on him and on a tractor than I'd ever seen. And to this very day, you could go, Peter is no longer with us, but his work is, he bought Heron, he didn't buy, he went to work he sold his farm and joined them as a winemaker at Heron Hill Winery, right up in Seneca Lake. It still exists there.
Yeah.
So is Constantine Frank. And believe it or not, over 100 other wineries that have grown in the area. So with now working on the farm, I learned value of the cost of tractors, the cost of vineyard equipment and what have you. And I met with people at Cornell, and they laid out, the professors there, Dr. Thompson, Nelson Shawless, they laid out an aerial view of the Finger Lakes and where, because of the weather condition, the lake condition, would be the best places for me to hunt, Phyllis and I, to hunt for a vineyard. And so I went up and down the east side of Seneca Lake, which today is recognized as one of the finest growing areas in the Finger Lakes.
Yeah.
And in the little town of Lodi, I ran into Frank Halsey, who had this here mobile home, and he had planted and grown and was caring for 13 acres of Nebraska grapes, Concord, Niagara, Catawba, and he had peaches, pears, and cherries, and sweet and tart cherries, that is. And I spoke with Frank, and Frank, the way I found him was from another farmer when I was another vineyardist, when I went up the road and said, and I would only go to those vineyards with those overlooking the lake that had lakefront property that was beautiful. And I already knew that the value of land there was $300 an acre, and Long Island was about $500. The Hudson Valley was about $500. Long Island was $1,000 to $3,000 for potato farms, or $5,000, and California was much beyond that. So my means was the $300,000 an acre. And Frank had a 61-acre farm, and he had just, as this vineyardist told me, Mel, go up to speak with Frank. He and Jen had done a great job on the farm, but unfortunately, he suffered a heart attack, and he may not be able to continue very long. So I went up and met with Frank and Jen, and indeed, he welcomed me there. And I told him, hey, Frank, I'd like to come up and work with you and Jen over the next 2 or 3 months, right through the harvest, for free. I'd like to bring my wife along in a little Apache tent trailer I'll attach to my Volvo station wagon. And when I leave IBM on Friday in Manhattan, my wife will drive down there. We'll drive up to your farm. I'll put up my little tent trailer, and we'll kind of live right alongside the barn here. We'll make do, and I'll learn as much as I can. And I'll put right now a down payment to buy the farm. And upon the end of 3 months, what I'm going to try and do also, Frank, is I want to see if I can get IBM to transfer me upstate. So I don't want to leave any bridges behind. Never leave bridges behind while you try in a new endeavor.
Right. Maintain the security.
So Frank was good enough. Not only did it work out, I must tell you that I look back upon it, and it was he wanted, if you will, I'll share this with you. He wanted $40,000 for the whole farm, all the equipment, the barn, his trailer, all the grapes. This goes way back.
What year was that?
to
What year was that?
1973.
Okay.
1973.
Okay. Yeah.
And so, but he said to me, Mel, after he got to know me, he says, you don't have to give me all the money. Let me take you to the bank with me. He says, and he introduced me to the banker, the first Ovid Bank in Ovid, New York. And with that introduction, the bank lent me. So all I put down, I think it was about $5,000, and the bank lent. I assumed his mortgage, and that's he didn't want to take the full payment because of tax reasons.
Right.
He wanted to get paid out over a bunch of years.
It's
So
right.
there you go. So I bought a business hardly on anything. Incredible, because I could take from the harvest that he had already in the field,
Right.
and pay off the loan. So we began that way. And when I went up there, Phyllis and I, we thought we were, of course, I was a very ambitious guy. And IBM was, by the way, good enough to transfer me to Syracuse. And I headed up as assistant engineer, the Niagara Mohawk account. Later on, I moved on to Eastman Kodak in Rochester. And no, I did not put them out of business. I did a good job.
So while you were doing all this commercial business, Phyllis was running the tractor on the farm, I'll bet.
You got it. Absolutely.
What a woman. I applaud that woman. What a woman. Fantastic.
What a find. After she got the 3 kids off to school, a typical day would begin at 6 in the morning or 5 or whatever. Phyllis and I would go into the barn. We'd mount the correct implements on the tractor with whatever she was going to do that day, whether it was mowing or spraying or post driving, on and on. And then we went back into the house. We had breakfast with the kids. Off the kids went on the school bus. Phyllis got out, drove the tractor all day. She'd call me lunchtime and say, Mel, everything was going well. Here's what happened. She might need advice on something. And then I came home in the evening. The kids were already home. And as the kids grew older, by the way, as each of their feet could reach the pedals of a tractor, they all sat around the table for breakfast. And believe me, right through high school and what have you, at college, they participated in the farm. They learned great responsibility.
How wonderful.
Fantastic.
Did any of them take over the farm when you retired?
Well, they were all looking at it. What we had said to them is, what we want you to do is we need you. We came from the big city, and you've grown up here in the country. And we really want you to go out and learn what it's like in the outside world. We need you to get the scope that we had in the city. And that was the fourth thing. I'm sorry. I'm going to go way back to the fourth important thing in New York, scope. For the price of a subway token, I think it was at 15 cents then, you could take that subway and it would go to museums, Coney Island. It would go to ethnic groups, Little Italy, go to Broadway, and you gain tremendous scope.
Absolutely.
So these children, we wanted them to have the scope of the world. So we said to them, look, you've got to go out to the world after you graduate from college, and you'll work for a year or 2 or 3 minimum. And then if you want to decide to come back to the farm, then we will welcome you. And I had already by that time planted wine grapes. And we were caring now for about 100 acres of grapes and 30 acres of peaches, and pears and cherries. You're welcome to come back if you think this is what you really want to do in life. Turns out they came back a few times during their college summers off and what have you. They ran harvest crews as we expanded in Michigan. We had satellite office there. We had satellite offices in Arkansas. We had offices in Dunkirk and Fredonia in New York. And then Robin, also our daughter, all of them uh, we went into Canada and opened up an operation in Canada because we grew from really not knowing exactly when Phyllis and I went up to the farm what we're going to do other than simply raising grapes. Well, we began with a U-pick operation. We began with tours of the farm. People wanted to come from the farm to learn about agriculture. So my three kids would mount on a tractor, put a hay wagon and bales of hay and drive them through the vineyards, telling them about the beginnings, how to grow grapes from the beginning, talk about the harvest, talk about the wines of the area, the winemakers, and to line them up so that when they came back to our old shed where we sold the fruits, the vegetables, and then later on wine and what have you, we had built a customer who would never leave without helping us by buying our products. And
That's
so
wonderful.
that was the beginning that way. But
so did you ever end up on the West Coast? When I looked on the line on Google, I saw a Venture Vineyard out in Oregon somewhere.
Yeah, well, and so we did. We went across the country. We became the nation's leading grower, packer, and shipper of Concord grapes.
That's why you're the Concord King.
That's exactly. Yeah. I had an article with Produce News. They began that, called me. They thrown me, calling me the Concord King.
Mel, let me guess. Big bucks.
Yeah.
Good for you. God bless you.
Well,
that's wonderful.
You.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, and that business, that was an amazing business, the way it grew. It's like you throw a stone in the water and it sends out ripples.
Yeah.
And so the way that began, that whole business, was I noticed going up and down the road in farmland, so to speak, in the farm country, there were little U-pick stands, and on the stands were Concord grapes. But I went to the supermarkets, the nearby ones, which was Tops and Wegmans and Grand Union in those days, the nearby ones, and Victory Markets in New York around me. They didn't have any Concord grapes. So I stopped and I said, why don't you have Concord grapes? They said, well, we've never had a supplier. Nobody's ever brought them. And so with that, that's the beginning of
music to your ears.
Now, Jeff, yeah, so I get up early in the morning, and Phyllis would have picked, say, about 24 Concord boxes, Agway little wooden boxes with a wooden handle that held about 4 or 8 quarts of grapes. We had some 4 quarts, we had some 8 quarts, and I load them into my Volkswagen station wagon on my way to IBM. I built a plywood rack, and I now stopped at the grocery stores along the way. And I'd say to them, the same kind of story as I did, trying to get a job.
Amazing.
Hey, try my product. Let me give you a couple of cases that are for free. And here's my phone number. And here's what I suggest you sell it at. And if that works for you, please give me a call. And my next time I come through 5 days a week, I'll be happy to deliver some grapes. And that's, believe it or not, how it all began.
Fantastic.
And then I found my way, to, once that was working, I was in Syracuse. And then I went to P&C was the largest chain in Syracuse. And a guy named Bob Murphy was the produce director. I went in to see Bob, and he was kind enough. He listened to my whole story. I showed him the grapes I bought, the quality and the baskets. He said, Mel, that looks really good. Why don't you bring me like 100 baskets to get started? And we'll see. I have to distribute them out to all the stores, and we'll see how it goes. And then a week or two later, he said, Mel, bring me 200, bring me 300. And now,
and you're off and running.
I was off and running. And so I had a great friend of mine, Marv Goldberg, and he was a physicist at the Syracuse University. And he said, Mel, you could use my garage as a warehouse because I couldn't run all the grapes up my pickup, in that quantity. So I'd make a few trips to Syracuse, drop them at his warehouse and his garage, and then roamed out to PNC. Well, now that was the beginning. Next year, I bought a refrigerated little trailer, and I put it outside the back of my barn. And now I was able to pre-cool the grapes, making them even better quality. And by that time, Bob Murphy told me, Mel, you got to get out of these baskets and get into a Californian type box. So he put me into a 20-pound lug. And now I was delivering, and these were self-assembled boxes that I worked with major box companies in designing them, and now the graphics on them. And now we began the expansion. So from PNC, I went to Wegmans, I went to Tops, I went to Grand Union. And as a Ripple, I made it my way down to New York, and I made it to Wakefern and ShopRite and Pathmark and all the major firms in the city. I made it to Boston to Stop and Shop, and on to Star Markets, the Chelsea Market. I found my way into the Hunts Point Market. And so I developed in every major city a terminal, a Hunts Point, to be a backup if there was ever a reject because of quality, for whatever the reason, when I was delivering to a store. And I worked my way across the country. That brings me to California, where I delivered to Safeway, to Rally's, to many of the
but this is all produce.
Lucky's, etc.
This is all produce you're talking about. Did you? Yeah, I'm sure you took the jump at one point into the wine industry, because if you're making Concord, if you're growing Concord grapes, you must have gone into the wine industry.
Well, now here comes the interesting thing, and indeed, we fooled around making wine with a couple of, and those are the days when the wineries, there were only 4 major players. There was Widmer's, Gold Seal, Taylor, Canandaigua Wine, and maybe Mogan out in Western New York. There was one other firm. But, and we did plant wine grapes. But as it turns out, the marketing and distribution would be different. And and we had made a major decision. Now we were successful enough to, when the season ended, in the growing season, in the last days of November, around November 26th, there's usually a frost or freeze in the Finger Lakes, and then we would sell out the rest of the grapes over the next 2 or 3 weeks out of my cold storage. I built 3 cold storage buildings with Phyllis cell units, the latest state of the art, to get the heat out of the grapes, to make sure that they had a good lifespan of somewhere between 12 and 15 days. And then I worked with Cornell on designing sulfur dioxide pads to fit in to extend the life even longer. But at any rate, Phyllis and I made a decision that, before we go into wine and turn our attention, and the winemakers work so hard at their skills, and they bring in their harvest, and then they spend the rest of the fall and the spring in finishing their wines and bottling them and all the marketing. And people want to feel you on the farm. They want to come to your farm, get to know the owners, and buy wine. There's the tasting areas and all that, which is all wonderful. But I decided that, if I was going to do anything, I would open up a produce operation in Florida. I was already expanding because I'd go into the different areas with grapes. And then in Michigan, the Michigan asparagus growers said, Mel, how about selling asparagus? And so we were the first to band and bunch and take bunches of asparagus in 1 pound units. And we sold those to the major supermarkets as well. And then we got into sweet onions out of Florida. But at any rate, let me go back to the important thing. So that reached me down to Florida, and I met the great tomato people at 6 L's in Homestead, Florida, and befriended them in Immokalee, Florida, and befriended them. And I worked with them in sweet onions. And then I decided that, I don't want to really work all year round. In life, if I have succeeded so much, let me enjoy the off season from growing grapes. So I would leave with Phyllis, and we go to Florida. By this time, the kids were in college. We go to Florida, and we bought a 42 gram bank stroller. And now, we bought that, and our first docking was where the International Boat Show is at the Marriott in
Yeah,
Miami.
I know it
So
well. I
Mel,
know it well.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so we would tell our friends, come on down and visit us at Mel. You'll always remember me. I'm at the Marriott, all the three M's, the Marriott, Mel at the Marriott in Miami. And so we got the troll. We didn't know the first thing about driving a big boat if you were piloting a boat. But at the Marriott, there were about 30 liveaboards. And I come back to my communication skills. So the 30 liveaboards would meter about the coffee and donuts the Marriott put out for their liveaboards. And they'd all speak about the topic of the day. And it could have been anchoring. It could have been use of the radio on the boat. It could have been any number of things. But when it came my turn to speak up, and of course, I would speak up. They'd say, "Mel, you're not a captain. You'll have to just wait till you're finished and then you could talk." And so at the one thing leads to another. So Phyllis and I became captains.
Did you take the
And
Chapman
now
course?
for 15 half years. Excuse me?
Did you take the Chapman course?
Yes, we took. Yes, you did. I'm staring at the Chapman book right now.
Yeah, I took
over
it. I took it too for my boat, but my boat was very different than yours. I had a 42-foot Wellcraft. It wasn't a big
Oh,
heavyweight, It's a different thing. But that's another year, another time.
yeah. Well, yeah. Okay. And so we would fly out the waters of the Bahamas, and we would go north up to Grand Bahama, make our way down to the beautiful Abacos, through the Exumas, all the way to Georgetown and back. And I would take the boat at the end of the season, Phyllis and I, and we'd bring it up. We did a big circle of going all around the nation, going up. The half circle being we go up the intercoastal. We go outside of New Jersey because the waters weren't dredged enough for us to get all the way through on the intercoastal there, into the ocean, up the Hudson, past the Statue of Liberty. And every time I went there, tears would come in my eyes as I remembered my grandmother.
Yeah.
God bless her.
So did you take a moment? Did you take a moment to stop and look at that statue and remember your forebearers and just kind of quell for the moment and say, "Oh, look, how did I get so far? Look what God did for me." That's what happens to me. I'm always full of gratitude.
Yeah. And then, we go up the Hudson, we take the Erie Canal. And then I would sing a few songs that everybody in New York, in those days, I've got a mule, her name is Sal, 15 miles on the Erie Canal.
Erie Canal, right?
And I take that right down through the canal system, the Cayuga Seneca Canal, into my lake, Seneca Lake, and anchored my boat right off Lodi. And then I'd bring it up to Geneva, where there was a marina, and park it there. And then when the harvest was over, we'd make the return trip. And so what a beautiful life.
You have had a wonderful life. You've had a wonderful life.
I want to tell you the finish, the journey. And so there's the subway system in New York, and the subway system has local stops and express stops if you ever were on the Broadway line.
Sure, I grew up in Brooklyn.
Local stop. In Manhattan, really.
Yeah.
In Manhattan, from the Battery up north into the Bronx, there's local and express. And so I look at the journey of life as each of those local stops is another adventure in life.
That's
growing up, getting educated, getting jobs, what have you. And now I'm no longer, those are the local stops. I'm no longer on the local because I'm 83 and a half.
Yeah,
and I hope
understand.
to live for another 83 years.
I understand.
But I'm on the express.
You're on the final
and
express.
The express makes fewer stops. And now I'm at not quite the last stop, but I can look down the tunnel of light And there on the platform, God bless them, it's my parents, my grandparents, my sister I lost, all my relatives, all my friends, and they're waving to me, welcoming me. So I am looking forward to, not that I want to
No,
end
but
this
it's
life, but I'm not
you know
afraid
what? I understand what
of
you mean.
eternity.
Yeah, I don't look forward to it. I don't. I look forward to it. I'm not maudlin about it, but it's my gift. I'm waiting for my gift at my time when it comes, and I'm going to be 81, so I understand what you mean. You know, it's a great gift in life to be able to look back and see with blessings how far you've come, but also look ahead at who's waiting for you up there. It is a great gift. Mel, I want to do
And,
this
and,
again. I
and
want to
I
do
hope,
this again with you because I feel like we didn't get into half of the things I'd like to ask you. Like I wanted to ask you, how did you feel the first time you took off the suit and you put your hands into the dirt and you said, I'm home, I'm in the dirt. I'd like to know more about that.
I'll have lots. I'll have lots of stories for you. But in the meantime, the importance of things is the transitions. The transitions one makes in life.
Right.
And I hope that I had some helpful hints in here for other people to improve, to have the courage after they've learned something. You can always go back to doing what you've done before.
Right.
And you should never, never really not take the opportunity,
Follow your dream.
to
Follow
do
your
better,
dream.
if you will.
Follow your dream.
Follow your dream.
I've told my
Absolutely.
kids and I've told so many people, I live by something I heard Winston Churchill said during World War II. When the Germans were blasting the hell out of London, he went on the radio and he said, I have a 5-word secret to success. And if we do this, we shall surely prevail. Never, 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 never quit. Never quit. Follow your dream. Go forward.
Never quit.
Never quit. I want to say to everyone who's watched today, I hope this was edifying to you and as great an experience to you as it was for me. This is an amazing man with an amazing story, and Phyllis didn't even get in the picture yet, so there's more to be told. So I'm going to invite them in front of everyone to come back sometime in the future. I would like to have you come back in the future.
Yeah, you'll need to hear Phyllis's story.
Absolutely. I really want to hear that.
Absolutely.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I remind you, we do a new show every Wednesday morning, and we come forth with guests such as this who are inspiring, have great stories, great things to learn from these people. So much of life is in the hands and in the memories of people like Mel and I who have lived through it for so many years. We have so much richness we want to share with you. Come back, listen to it. Tell us about someone you know that might make a great guest on the show. Write in and tell me their names, and I'll contact them, or they can contact me. And I remind you, everybody has their own story. You have your own story, and no one can tell it like you can. Come on the show and tell the story, because if you don't, your family, your children, your world won't know the value and the gifts that you have to give them. Tell your story to someone. Write it down before it's too late, because when it's too late, it's too late. So, again, I tell you, as I say every week, my mantra in life is a simple one. Tell someone you love them today. Hug them in, make them know how important they are to you, because God only gives us one time to do this in this world, and only one time in this life. Live it out. Go for the gusto. Like Mel. Go out and do it. Don't sit around like a couch potato. Go out and do it. But I want to say how really much I enjoyed chatting with you, and I'm going to follow up with you because I want to do it. Even if we don't do the show, I want to talk with you. We'll have coffee. I'll come visit you.
Okay.
Take care, man. Thank you for tuning into the show. I hope that it resonated with you. It certainly did with me. And I hope it encouraged you to realize the true power of your story. As a reminder, new episodes will be released Wednesday mornings on your favorite podcast apps, and also on YouTube as well. Be sure to like, subscribe, and turn your notification button on to ensure that you receive updates on new episode releases. I'm grateful for your reviews and your support. The love is certainly felt. Keep it coming. You can reach out to connect with me on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn, or stop by my website, toeverypageofturning.com. All links are clickable in the show notes for quick access. Do you think that you or someone you know may be our most inspiring guest yet? Let's hope so. Click on our contact page and get in touch on my website and share your story. I look forward to reading each one personally. My best-selling book, To Every Page You're Turning, which was published by Mascot Books, is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, and many more popular book retailers. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Till next time, remember that every day is a new opportunity to write your new page in your incredible journey. And it is incredible. You're the only one who has it.